there, my name is Julie Fei-Fan Balzer, and today we're going to be talking about quilt squares. So even if you're not much of a stitcher, the ScanNCut has a ton of built-in quilt designs that make it really easy to learn how to make your very own quilt blocks. So let's get started. From the machine, I'm going to go and choose Pattern. And I'm going to go to the second page. You can see there's a whole bunch of quilting designs here, so I'm going to choose that. And then I'm going to choose this one that looks like a bunch of squares going sideways. And actually there's 11 pages of designs here. So I'm going to navigate through until I find the one that I'm looking for. Here it is with the circle right at the center. Now here's the really fun part. You can make this as big or as small as you want. You can make it a totally weird size, whatever it is that you want. And then you simply say, okay. And then when you click on the piece that you want, it'll highlight it on the screen so you can see what it is. I'm going to say, okay. Now the machine automatically knows that I need 2 of these in order to make my block. And you'll see there's a double line here. And the double line is because the inside line is the stitch line and the outside line is an automatic 1/4 inch seam allowance that the machine is doing, and that's where the cut line is. So I'm going to say set. I'm going to go add. Now let's add the other side right over here. And say, okay, and again, it knows that we need 2. And notice that it has automatically flipped these blocks too, because we're actually going to be doing all of this with the fabric facing the right side down. So now I want to move my pieces a little bit separately, because the way I've laid my fabric onto my mat, I have one piece of fabric on this side and one piece on this side. I'm going to hit add again. I'm going to go to this next portion, add it. You can see it's flipped. It has its 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to drag that over so that it's going to cut out of this other piece of fabric. We're going to add one last time, grab our last parts again. It automatically knows we need 2. It's flipped it. It's added the seam allowance, and I'm just going to drag those into place. So now all I need to do is load in my fabric, scan it in to make sure that everything's cutting where I want, and we'll be ready to go. So I'm going to open the dust cover and I'm going to load in my mat, and you'll notice that my fabric is face down, and I'm going to hit the scan button and scan it in. So now I like to drag everything so that it's not quite sitting on the edge, so it has a little more space in here. And so once I have dragged everything into place and I'm happy with the arrangement, then I am going to be ready to cut and draw. So I'm going to say okay. And I want you to look. I have 2 sets of lines here. Look what happens when I hit draw. The outside set of lines disappears and just that inside set is there, and that is what we want. So now we need to put in the pen tool. So there are 2 kinds of pens. The ones with the stripes are meant for quilting. The blue one is water soluble and the purple one is air soluble, and meaning they will disappear either with contact with water or contact with air over time. This is a dye-based pen, which is not going to disappear, but I'm going to use that because it's a little bit darker, and just for the camera, I want you to be able to really see it. But if I were really quilting this, I would absolutely use either the purple or the blue soluble pens. So this is the pen holder. So to open it, I'm simply going to click the button in the back that opens it up, and then I remove the clear cap from my pen, and I'm going to drop it into the holder and close that up till it clicks. There's a little divot at the top. I'm going to go ahead and put the cap in that divot so that I don't lose it. And now we are ready to load this pen holder into the machine. So now I'm simply going to remove the blade, and I'm going to go ahead and pop in the pen holder with the Brother logo facing forward and lock it down. And then I'm just going to press the start button. I'm going to choose finish. And now watch what happens when I hit cut. You'll see that all those inside lines disappear and we just have the outside lines. Now I want to check my settings to make sure I have a cut speed of 1, a cut pressure of 4, and I'm going to put in my blade, which is set to a 5. I've already done a test cut to make sure that that's the right setting, but of course you should do a test cut to see what works for you. Once that's all set, I'm just going to hit start. Going to unload the mat, and then I like to pull away the excess fabric first. And then once that is all pulled away, I like to use a spatula tool to get under there and pull off my individual fabric pieces. So let me get all these pieces off the mat. So now you can see that each piece, okay, has the stitch line drawn on it, and then it's cut a 1/4 inch away, and that's on the back or the wrong side of the fabric. So let me just lay out my parts here so that you can see how that block is going to go together. And obviously this is from the back with the alternating colors, and if you look over at the finished block, you can see how that's going to work. So in case you've never stitched, I want to show you the basics just of how these stitch lines help you to line it up. We're going to go ahead and we're going to pin these two pieces together. So we're going to put them right sides together, and they don't really look like they fit, but that's where these lines that we've drawn are going to come in handy. So I'm going to take a pin and I'm going to stab the pin through the drawn corner right here at the end. Then the pin is going to come through the matching drawn corner on the other piece of fabric. You can see it coming through right there. So now I know that those two corners perfectly match up, and I'm ready to go ahead and just leave that pin in there. Then I take another pin and I'm going to repeat that process on the other side. I stab it through the drawn corner. Then I make sure that the other side comes through in that matching corner. Somebody once told me that if, taking the time to pin really makes a big difference in how your sewing turns out. Now this still doesn't look like it matches up, and that's because we need to get a center point. You can do this in a couple different ways. You can actually fold it to find the center point. You can eyeball it. I personally am a little bit more of an eyeballer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stab this into what essentially looks like the center to me here. And then on the other side, I'm going to do the same thing, come through on the line. And once that is pinned, then I know that that matches and I can pin it. And if you want, you can even add another pin. There's no rule about how many or how few pins can go into a project. So I can again stab it through somewhere approximately halfway between and then grab the line on the other side in the other piece and make sure that that is coming together. And I could do that again, or I can leave it totally up to me. I'm an over pinner, so I'm going to go ahead and pin that one too, especially on a curve, to make sure that it's there. So just take a little time, be a little fussy, make sure that you've got everything right. You took the time to draw it after all, so now you know it's going to be totally perfect. So now that we have everything pinned, and I would do this with all of these, then we can head right on over to the sewing machine and just start stitching. At the sewing machine, I'm using a 1/4 inch foot, but essentially I'm just sewing on the line that we drew. That's all I'm doing, is looking for that line and sewing on it. I want to make sure not to sew over any of my pins, so when I reach any of the pins, I do go ahead and yank them out. And then I just continue to sew on that line. When you first pull it out of the sewing machine, it looks all crumply and you think, uh-oh, maybe this didn't work. But if you stitched right on the line, you're going to be so happy, because as soon as you flip it around, you can see, there you go, you got your perfect 1/4 of a circle there inserted into the square. So now I would repeat this same process with my other pieces so that I would have 4 pieces that all have a half circle, or a 1/4 circle rather, and then the square around it. Then I would attach 2 of them to each other and the other 2 to each other, right? Stitching again on that stitching line, and then all of them together then the other way. And magically, as you can see, when you get all of them together, you have an amazing quilt block. Now there are so many different built-in quilt designs in the ScanNCut for you to play with and experiment with. There are circles and squares and triangles and diamonds and all kinds of shapes. So I hope that you'll have a lot of fun with that. Thanks so much for watching, and for more tips, tricks, and tutorials, be sure to visit my blog at balzerdesigns.typepad.com, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and of course, don't forget about the ScanNCut website at ScanNCut.com.